Hello.
It was supposed to be nothing, just a simple errand. My mom had asked me earlier that day if I could stop by her friend's house and drop off a small bag of things she had borrowed. Some books, a scarf, and a couple of other odds and ends. "She's expecting them," my mom said casually, as if it was the most ordinary request in the world. I didn't think twice. I'd been to her house before, though always with my mom. She lived just a few blocks away, in a neat two-story place with a little garden in the front. It wasn't somewhere I had ever been alone, but I figured it didn't matter. I told myself it would take all of 5 minutes. Hand her the bag, say hello, and head home. By the time I walked up her street, the evening had already settled in. The sky was fading into a deep blue, streetlights flickering to life one by one. The bag felt light in my hand, swinging casually at my side as I walked. My thoughts weren't on the visit at all. I was already planning what I'd do once I got back home. Her porch light was on, glowing warmly against the cool dusk. I stepped up and rang the bell, expecting her to appear the way I always remembered. Dressed neatly, maybe an apron around her waist if she had been cooking, her hair perfectly in place. But when the door opened, everything I expected dissolved in an instant. She was there, framed by the light from inside, wearing a silk robe tied loosely at the waist. It shimmered slightly in the glow of the hallway lamp, the soft fabric hinting at the curves it concealed but didn't entirely hide. Her hair was down, tumbling loosely over her shoulders, and she looked at me with a calm, almost knowing expression. "Oh," she said, her lips curving into a faint smile. "You came." For a moment, I forgot how to speak. My throat tightened, and I managed to lift the bag slightly as if that explained why I was standing frozen on her porch. Yeah. My mom asked me to bring these back to you." "Thank you," she said warmly, taking the bag but not stepping back. Instead, she lingered in the doorway, her eyes holding mine longer than seemed necessary. "Why don't you come in for a moment?" I hesitated, every instinct telling me I should politely decline. But her tone wasn't casual. It carried something heavier, something I couldn't quite name. "I won't keep you long," she added softly. And just like that, I found myself stepping inside. The air in her house was warmer than outside, filled with the faint scent of something floral. Maybe her perfume, maybe just the house itself. The lights were dim, only a lamp or two glowing, giving everything a soft, golden tint. It didn't feel like the usual kind of visit. Felt quieter, more intimate. She set the bag on a chair and turned back to me, still smiling faintly. "You've grown taller since the last time I saw you," she remarked, her eyes traveling over me briefly before meeting mine again. I laughed awkwardly, unsure what to say. "I guess so." For a moment, she just looked at me. There was no rush in her expression, no sense that she wanted me gone quickly. If anything, it felt the opposite, like she had been waiting. I shifted my weight, glancing toward the door, but then she stepped closer, her robe brushing lightly as she moved. "You don't have to rush off," she said. "It's nice to have company." Her voice was steady, calm, but beneath it there was something else, something that made the air between us heavier. I nodded slowly, still unsure of what I had just walked into. It was supposed to be a quick errand, just dropping something off. But as she stood there in her robe, watching me with those steady eyes, I realized this was not going to be the kind of visit I had imagined. I should have left right then. The bag was no longer in my hands, the errand technically complete, and nothing was stopping me from saying a quick goodbye. But I didn't. Something about the way she stood there, calm, unhurried, wrapped in that silk robe that caught the lamplight, made it feel almost impossible to turn away. She motioned toward the living room. "Sit for a moment," she said gently. "You've walked all this way. At least let me make you some tea." I hesitated, shifting slightly on my feet. "It's really no trouble. I don't want to bother you." Her smile deepened, though there was a glint in her eyes that didn't feel entirely casual. "You're not bothering me at all." She turned and walked toward the kitchen before I could argue. The living room was warm, lit only by a single lamp in the corner. The air smelled faintly of lavender, mixed with the sharper note of freshly brewed tea. I sat down on the edge of the couch, the fabric soft beneath me, and glanced around. Books lined the shelves. A throw blanket was draped over one armrest, and on the low table sat a small vase of flowers, simple but arranged with care. When she returned, she was carrying 2 mugs, steam curling gently upward. She placed one in front of me before settling into the armchair across from where I sat. As she did, the silk of her robe shifted slightly, catching the light. I tried not to stare, tried to keep my focus on the tea, but my eyes kept betraying me. "Thanks," I murmured, wrapping my hands around the mug. For a while, we just sipped quietly. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that seemed to hum with unspoken words. She broke it first. "It's funny," she said softly, setting her mug down. "Your mom has always been good about helping me with little things. But tonight, it feels different having you here." I raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" Her gaze lingered on me, steady and unreadable. "Just different." The weight in her tone pressed against me, and I found myself searching for something to say, but the words didn't come. She leaned back slightly, her eyes never leaving mine. "It gets quiet here at night. Too quiet sometimes. Having someone sit here, even for a little while, it's nice." I nodded, unsure of what to do with the sudden tightness in my chest. "I get that," I said quietly. She smiled faintly, but it wasn't the kind of smile you give out of politeness. It was softer, almost wistful. After a pause, she reached for her robe's belt, tightening it slightly as though adjusting it for comfort. The simple movement drew my attention more than it should have, and when I looked back up, I found her eyes already on me. "You don't mind staying a little longer, do you?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made it feel less like a question and more like a test. I swallowed hard. "No," I said almost too quickly. "I don't mind." Her smile returned, gentler this time, as she picked up her mug again. "Good." The lamp's glow wrapped the room in warmth, and the silence stretched between us once more. But it wasn't the silence of strangers. It was something else. Something that made me wonder if I had walked into far more than I ever expected when I rang her doorbell. And when her hand brushed lightly against mine as she set her mug down, I knew this was no ordinary evening. Her hand lingered against mine longer than it should have. It wasn't forceful, not even intentional at first glance, but I could feel the weight of it, the deliberate choice not to pull away. My pulse quickened, and the silence in the room suddenly felt thick, charged, like it was waiting to break. I looked at her, half expecting her to laugh it off, to shift back into the casual warmth she had greeted me with. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, her eyes never leaving mine. The glow of the lamp softened the edges of her face, highlighting the curve of her smile, the faint rise and fall of her chest beneath the silk robe. "I shouldn't keep you too long," she said, her voice calm, almost teasing. "You probably had other plans tonight." I shook my head slowly. Not really. Her smile deepened at that. Then maybe it's not so bad that you came by. The words carried a weight that went beyond politeness. She leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on her knees, her chin balanced on her hand as though studying me. The robe slipped just enough at her shoulder to reveal the faintest glimpse of bare skin. It wasn't an accident, I could feel that. My throat tightened. I wanted to look away, to break the tension, but something in her gaze pinned me in place. "You've grown up," she said softly. The words hung in the air, heavier than they had any right to be. I let out a quiet breath, unsure how to respond. "I guess I have." She tilted her head, her lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I can see it." Her hand moved again, brushing against mine deliberately this time. Her fingers curled slightly, testing, waiting to see if I'd pull away. I didn't. Instead, I turned my hand just enough that our fingers intertwined. The shift was small, but it changed everything. The silence between us was no longer about courtesy or small talk. It was about the unspoken truth neither of us wanted to admit aloud. She drew in a slow breath, her eyes still locked on mine. "If you stay," she whispered, "things won't be the same after." I knew she was right. This was the line, the moment where choice turned into consequence. I should have stood up, thanked her for the tea, and left. That would have been the simple, safe thing to do. But I didn't move. Instead, I leaned forward, and in the small space between us, I could feel the warmth of her breath. For a second, the world held still. Then she closed the gap. Her lips met mine, soft at first, almost tentative, as if she too wasn't sure we should. But the moment our hands tightened together, the kiss deepened, carrying with it all the tension we had been holding back since the second I walked through her door. It was reckless. It was wrong. But it was also inevitable. When we finally broke apart, her forehead rested lightly against mine, her voice barely audible. "You should have just dropped it off and left," she whispered. I smiled faintly, my chest pounding. "Yeah," I said, "I should have." But neither of us moved. And in that silence, the line was gone, crossed, erased, forgotten. The morning light crept in through the thin curtains, casting long stripes of gold across the living room. The air smelled faintly of lavender mixed with something warmer, like the ghost of last night still lingered in the walls. For a moment, I didn't move. I just sat there on the edge of the couch, staring at the half-empty mugs of tea still sitting on the table. They felt like relics from another life, one that existed just a few hours ago, before everything had changed. Her robe was draped loosely over the armrest now, as though it had been carelessly discarded. The sight of it made my chest tighten. It wasn't just a piece of clothing anymore. It was the beginning of a story I hadn't expected to be part of. I heard the faint sound of footsteps, soft against the hardwood floor. She appeared in the doorway, her hair slightly tousled, a calm but unreadable expression on her face. She had tied the robe back around her waist, but something about the way she wore it now felt different. Less like comfort, more like armor. "Morning," she said quietly, her voice gentle but carrying a note of caution. "Morning," I replied, my throat dry. She moved toward the table, picking up one of the mugs and running her fingers absently along its rim. For a while, she didn't say anything. The silence pressed against me again, but this time it wasn't filled with anticipation. It was filled with weight. Finally, she spoke. "No one can know about this." Her words weren't sharp, but they were firm. She didn't look at me when she said them. Her gaze stayed fixed on the mug in her hands, as if it was easier to face that than me. I nodded slowly. I know. She glanced at me then, her eyes softer but no less serious. I don't regret it, she whispered. But it has to stay between us. Her honesty hit me harder than I expected. There was no game in her voice, no teasing, just reality. I wanted to ask what it meant, what would happen next, but I knew the answers wouldn't be simple. I stood, running a hand through my hair, searching for the right words. I wasn't planning on telling anyone, I said finally. Relief flickered across her face, though it was fleeting, replaced quickly by that same careful expression. She set the mug down and moved closer to the door, as if guiding me toward it. I slipped on my jacket, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. She stopped just short of opening the door, turning to look at me one last time. Her eyes softened, and for the first time that morning, she smiled. Not the playful smile from the night before, but something quieter, more bittersweet. Thank you, she said softly, for bringing those things by. The words carried more meaning than they should have, and I couldn't help but smile faintly back. Anytime. She opened the door, and the cool morning air rushed in, sharp and grounding. I stepped outside, the world around me already alive with its usual rhythm. But for me, nothing felt usual anymore. As I walked down the quiet street, I replayed it all in my head. The way she had stood there in her robe, waiting, the way her eyes had searched mine, the way the silence had pulled us together until neither of us could step back. It had started as nothing more than a simple errand. But I knew I would never forget the night I thought I was just dropping something off, and found her waiting,